Hey, Channel Insiders, welcome back for another episode of Channel Insider Partner POV, your source for untapped opportunities and unfiltered opinions in the IT channel, all to help you make better business decisions. I'm your host, Katie Bavoso. My guest today is TJ Houske, CEO of multi-cloud solution provider OTAVA. TJ is coming off of two very high-energy weeks. First, having helped OTAVA announce its new framework, S.E.C.U.R.E, then presenting at Channel Partners Conference and Expo in Las Vegas. You've had a busy few weeks. Are you feeling okay? Have you caught up on sleep after Channel Partners Expo?
Yeah, I don't know that anybody ever catches up on that kind of sleep debt, but it's certainly nice to be back in the Eastern time zone. So that works. How about you? Are you catching up on your rest?
Don't I know it? Yes, as I mentioned to you before we got started, hoping that you don't see a sneeze, sniffle, or cough during this call, but there were a lot of handshakes last week, and I'm paying for it. So let's first of all talk about OTAVA and get to know your company. You design and secure multi-cloud solutions, but when you talk about OTAVA, how do you explain who you are and what you do?
Yeah, it's a great question, especially in today's landscape. So interesting because it's so competitive, and unfortunately it seems to be overstated, right? We just say cloud and then hope that everybody gets what that is. It reminds me of that scene from Zoolander, right? Where you're just putting it out there. But at the end of the day, I think the easiest way to describe OTAVA, where we separate ourselves relative to the industry in cloud, is data protection. And so if you look at the evolution of our company, 30 years ago, we started as bare metal, hosted co-location, specializing in being early adopters to HIPAA and high trust certifications back then, which allowed for us to be early to provide whether production or disaster recovery workload support for Fortune companies all the way down to small business. And then that evolved into cloud, but the root was data protection and compliance. And we carried that up into cloud, and then now have carried that up into secure and compliant multi-cloud solutions. So I think data protection is our sweet spot, be it regular data, backup, disaster recovery. But I think that's probably the best way to really organize and concentrate your focus on OTAVA.
For me, OTAVA is one of those names in the industry where I hear it everywhere, and I've heard it throughout my career. But when did you go to market officially? How long have you been around?
So, realistically, if you look, largely grown through acquisition, right? In independent organizations put together to become who we are today, but online tech, so we'll call it approximately 30 years ago, and continue to graduate, renamed the organization as S.E.C.U.R.E Communications. Our parent company acquired the organization in 2017 and moved into really adjusting the name, so to speak, in late 2018, early 2019. So really excited that at that point in time, we went from online tech to OTAVA, and we've carried that name now for the last 6 years.
And let's discuss your clients and the verticals that they typically operate in. One of my favorites on your website that I saw personally was transportation, just because I have a lot of questions when it comes to literal moving parts. But you tell me, who are your clients? What are their sizes, and what do they typically do?
If you kind of think about the way in which our business is organized, while we handle all sectors with the exception of a concentration in SLED, and you get into public sector, we largely stay in healthcare. We have a really good a good presence in finance and some of those organizations that we serve. And then tiers from Fortune all the way down to small business. Our customer sections, though, are really broken into two pillars. So we have our enterprise, as we call them, or commercial customers that are end consumers. And then we have a partner ecosystem. And that's almost 200 different partners that run different clouds within our clouds, whether that be fully privatized or hybrid versions that solve. And the neat thing is that each of them has niches that they play into. So we have an opportunity to service and claim success through their success to other sectors that we might not directly serve. But I would say an area of great competence for us is healthcare, and then partners in general, and helping the various ecosystems that they support, or the customer ecosystems that they support.
So earlier in the month of March, OTAVA introduced the S.E.C.U.R.E framework to support organizations' continuous security posture advancement. So S.E.C.U.R.E, first of all, is an acronym, and I want to make sure that I'll take this off your plate to be able to say all the words involved in S.E.C.U.R.E. It stands for Shrink, Examine, Contain, Undo, Recover, Evaluate. That's right. Beautifully put together that it also says the exact word.
Yeah, right? You like that?
Yeah, I do. Kudos to everybody that came up with that. So, plainly put, tell me, what is the S.E.C.U.R.E framework?
Yeah, I mean, first, to your point, kudos, goes out to Chaz Motter. So Chaz is one of our senior product specialists here, and we were joking about this, but it's always good ideas seem to either come to you when you're running or taking a shower is kind of how it works, right? So Chaz had been really putting his head around, hey, how do I help the internal organization think about the way in which we organize our product groups or cohorts so that we can have a fulsome conversation with any customer, regardless of segment, regardless of size. And equally, how could we look at the portfolio of products that we have to make sure that we're continuing to compete and show relevancy in each of those segments? And so he came up with the S.E.C.U.R.E acrostic. What was interesting is that coming from my background in security, I saw it as an opportunity to organize a consistent, repetitive conversation. I kind of call it like the Chick-fil-A of security experiences. So that customers can make sure that in any conversation as they're making decisions, that we've covered the full spectrum of those things that they need to be thinking about in terms of like defensible architecture. And so as all great ideas happen, right, it started one way and it evolved in a very quick amount of time. And the adoption for it, not only internal, but external, and the feedback that we've received from customers is, man, this is fantastic that we can have this kind of conversation and be really thoughtful about which area are we focusing in on, or what's our greatest need right now? Because the reality is security never ends. It's a journey, not a destination. And it can be overwhelming. And I think that genuinely, there's a lot of companies that make a lot of profit on confusion. And so to make this simple, it can, it's still complex. It just doesn't have to be complicated. And so I really like that that's what the framework allows for us to do and have more thorough conversations that really help customers get to the business outcomes that they're trying to achieve.
From a consumer standpoint, I'm such a fan of what you said about how there are companies really in the tech industry that profit off of confusion and make people go like, oh, that's a big word. I don't really understand what's going on, so I guess I should get that.
That's right.
Get that thing.
Yeah.
So would you mind kind of like breaking down a use case scenario for S.E.C.U.R.E to paint a picture for the customers that are listening when they go, okay, S.E.C.U.R.E framework, what the heck is that and how do I use it and apply it in real time?
Sure, 100%. Yeah. And I think that's spot on, right? Like to your point, like I think we tend to forget, like when we leave the consumer world and we move into the commercial world for our day job, that we're still consumers operating in the commercial world, right? And for whatever reason, generationally, I think that's shifting, but a lot of people compartmentalize that. And so they tend to stop thinking like a buyer and start thinking more like a seller. If you think more like a buyer, the relevancy of this is really like eyes wide open of, holy cow, this makes a lot of sense, right? So if you think about any product set that you would buy from OTAVA for data protection, whether that be backup as a service or disaster recovery as a service, whether that be endpoint protection, which would include things like anti-malware, if you're focusing on just basic data protection elements within this framework, they all fit in a category, right? The outcome of what you're trying to achieve through being more secure is where this flow is really brilliant. So, best practice in defensible architecture, the first one is you want to reduce your threat vector, right? So you want to shrink the attack surface. More to manage creates more opportunity, less to manage or a choke point allows for you to have better control, for the customer. But once you shrink it, what I find that the customers are typically struggling with as they adopt new technologies and even the processes is examining the success or failure of the particular products or processes that they're putting in place. And so now you're moving from shrink into examine to start saying, okay, I understand that I've bought this. This was the initial stage, was to shrink that. But second, how can I examine it for its effectiveness to make sure that we're improving the overall security posture? That's the end goal, right, that we want to achieve. And then last, in that next section, as you kind of move forward, is contain. And the truth is, and I think that people don't like to hear this, but the truth stands on its own 2 feet. So, and that is, we're moving into a time now where it's not about if, it's about when you have a security incident. And the goal is you want to mitigate the risk and the damage to keep it as an incident and not let it turn into a full-blown breach. And so you really want to be thinking about contain from a perspective of if, not when this happens. Am I set up the right way in incident response? Do I have my processes organized? Are my technical safeguards in place that I know that what they got to, they're not going to get to the crown jewel, right? They're going to get to where I want them to get to, whether that's honeypot or anything else that you're going to organize, for that. And then undo is just the reality of, I think we've been conditioned for probably the last decade, you hear, have good backups, have good backups, have good backups, right? We probably should have been teaching people for the last 10 years, check your backups, check your backups, check your backups. Because I think that a lot of people have become conditioned to focus on the backup and not focus on the restore and undoing the damage and how fast the recovery time objectives are, recovery point objectives are. Because when you're down or you're in a state of abnormality relative to your business service, especially if it's your core services, right, that's revenue impacting. And so you have revenue loss at that point, even more so than just a security incident. So undo really focuses on asking those tough questions. How much do we want in terms of protection? What kind of insurance do we want to pay for, right, relative to that technical process? And what do we need and why? And then recover puts you in a position that says, okay, now that we're restoring, what does that process look like? Because it's not just rolling it back. There's people that get involved. Who's handling what? Who's on first? Who makes what phone calls? Do you have to involve your insurance provider? And if you do, who owns that? That's business continuity planning. And I find that a lot of folks really struggle with that, which genuinely business continuity planning is largely the least expensive, but the most expensive, meaning least expensive to do and work through because you already have the people, you already have the process, and you have some form of technology, but it's the most expensive if it's done wrong. And now all of a sudden in a moment where you're exposed and vulnerable because your process wasn't there, you didn't have a plan, so therefore you're going to fail. And then last is evaluation. And I think evaluation is that journey, not a destination, helping people really understand, one, anything that you're doing today is outdated by the time in which you finish it. And so if you can just embrace this as a lifelong journey, it's never ending. It's kind of like personal growth. And if I could just stay the course and stay within the framework, then what we hope that customers will embrace is that secure is just a never-ending conversation. You're just revisiting back to the framework on a regular, perpetual basis to say, where does this decision fall within that framework? And where are we relative to where we were last year as we go from version 1.0 to 1.1 and 1.2? So that's how I think about it and talk about it. And I think you can have a very fulsome conversation with somebody in an hour, which is really how it's designed so that they're not overwhelmed. Because again, the goal is you want to help people be successful at this, not like freeze.
I know that you gave a talk at Channel Partners Expo last week in relation to the secure framework and AI. Is AI one of the driving factors for OTAVA to be really invested in the security conversation this year, and why?
It is. It's a great question. So yeah, at the expo, my topic that they asked me to spend time on was securing generative AI. And a lot of what I'm seeing right now in terms of market is, it reminds me of circa early 2000s when there was an app for that, right? The campaign that got ran by Apple forever. And then you had everything was in the cloud. And now we're just prepending every statement with AI and thinking that makes it relevant, right? It's attractive. And, money's being invested in those things classified as AI. The truth is today we're already consuming AI on a lot of different levels, whether it's at your personal cell phone device, the cars that you're driving, the platforms that you're consuming in CRM, CMDB databases, right? What I think that a lot of people are now getting more specifically into is the intentional consumption of employees going to generative AI engines. And so whether that be Bard or, OpenAI's ChatGPT, there is a new conversation that's happening here, which is more around, hey, similar to the pandemic, and people on a global scale had never seen that kind of a supply chain problem. I mean, we had lines in grocery stores for toilet paper, right? You have people in the AI world saying, I don't know where to start. Like, how do I secure this? How do I help my employees understand what's the right way to use this and the wrong way? And how do I have this conversation with them? Because they're using it. I'm not going to be able to put that genie back in the bottle, but where do we start? And so I use that presentation to say, again, this secure framework, whether it's managerial controls, more administrative in nature, or technical controls, you can just come right back to the same framework and say, how do you want to do that? And so we presented it in that context and talked about concepts like data anonymization, and how you use training data sets, what data you should put in training data sets as an example, as an element of shrinking the attack vector, right? Or in the end, when you're evaluating, we talked about establishing a governance body. What does that actually look like? Ethical use of AI, let alone just general acceptable use, from a corporation perspective. And so it's certainly, I think, going to be a ramped level of intensity for businesses that are centrally focused on, we want to use AI. We see the business value. And I put a statistic in there that I thought was the most interesting. And when you look at market opportunity and everything's driven by money, it's just the reality of life. it's got about a $350 billion market opportunity in generative AI over the next, measured in 5 years. So you're not gonna not use AI, right? So our focus is very much on, yep, you're gonna use it. How do we tie that into the S.E.C.U.R.E framework? How can we help you protect against that? And then how can we equally use those same tool sets within our business to add more value to customers that want to consume it?
So we've talked about the focus and how its framework is also, I would call it a mindset just as much as well. But what vendors or solutions are supporting the S.E.C.U.R.E framework that you might be able to talk about?
I think one that's really interesting and where it's going to go right now that we're pretty bullish on, we've been with them for a long time, is Fortinet. So I guess for your show, Katie, and for me, we would love for them to be a sponsor for both of us, right? As a company, they have a pretty big market cap. So Fortinet, we appreciate you. But I'm really excited to watch Fortinet, and I'll tell you why. Like, of all the companies out there that I see, as an organization from a security perspective, we know where they are relative to like the Gartner quadrant. When you look at Palo Alto, who's, they're a premier leader, Cisco, who's certainly a known leader. But when you look at what Fortinet has built their platform on as an example to your question of like who, why, what solution, they're a platform based, they're an ecosystem, right? So for those customers that are consuming, whether they're consuming services vis-a-vis OTAVA, which we're a huge Fortinet shop from cradle to grave, edge, ingress to egress in our data center, we use a lot of their technologies because we've been able to create and leverage their total package, right, as you will. I'm interested in that for customers. I think that scale economies and reducing the number of vendors that you have participating is going to give you the best option to make AI effective. What a lot of people are having problems with, or like a real challenge, is the understanding that AI is not new. Like, language models and, neural networks, a lot of this stuff's been active and running in late 40s, early 50s, and it was niched, right? And now, because it's out in the public domain, and again, we'll go to the consumer mindset, residential or every other person in the world playing with GPT, right? Like, give me a business plan in the persona of Ryan Reynolds with the tone of Snoop Dogg. That's actually pretty fun, right? You can do some pretty cool things. But when you think about it in context of security, now all of a sudden it seems like it's new. So I digress, sorry. But to kind of take it back to Fortinet, I think they're a solution that we spend a lot of time leading with to talk to customers about. It's trusted. They have a platform that is built, that is ready, that already has AI integrated, and you can leverage it at scale. Now, there's many others out there. Cisco does it, Palo Alto does it, and there's new up-and-comers. My biggest concern for security in the near term is there will be a lot of new entrances into the market. And they're going to get attention and they're going to get funding. And the consequence of putting your data in somebody that might be an early adopter like the 90s .com bubble is that you're giving away your most precious asset, your company data, and you're putting it into an engine that you don't know necessarily what they're going to do with it. And so my advice to people is pick from a tried true vendor, pick from somebody that has the right processes, the right reputation, in place, that you're not going to put your crown jewel, into somebody's footprint. So I think they're a big one. Obviously, from a cloud perspective, we're a very big Broadcom shop. We're part of the Premier program now, so the new one. We're one of the top 400 partners in that program. And I think that they're doing a fantastic job really bringing in and leveraging AI. And I know that that's got a long way to go, but they're doing it more from workload optimization, workload placement, genuinely, security, and obviously, and the like. So those are two I'm pretty bullish on. I think Fortinet, VMware, you can't go wrong, but that is not to suggest they're the end all be all. There's many of other, big up and comers and already currently established, partners out there too.
My conversation with TJ is not over. Come back on Tuesday to learn about OTAVA's new journey as a premier partner in the by invite only Broadcom Advantage Partner Program. Thank you to TJ for joining me today, and thank you for watching or listening. Check out all episodes of Channel Insider Partner POV on channelinsider.com, or watch us on YouTube at channelinsider_news and trends, or listen to us in podcast format on your favorite listening platform. We put out a new video and podcast every week, sometimes twice, so don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow wherever possible to never miss an episode. Once again, I'm Katie Bavoso, and I'll see you next time.